Autumn in 1919 painted the port city of Harrowhaven in strokes of copper and gold, yet inside the cavernous shipworks the mood was as gray as the battleships they repaired. Timber scaffolds groaned against the hulls, steam hissed from the riveters, and somewhere a gull wailed like a hinge in need of oil. Foreman Elias Kerr strode across the pier with the taut air of a man accustomed to orders obeyed before they fully left his lips. But the weeks since the Admiralty's urgent refit order had cracked something delicate: tempers. Deadlines sharpened every glance, mistakes magnified until small slips ignited arguments. And at the center of the growing storm stood a respected but proud master plater, Franklin Doss, whose recent misalignment of a steel plate threatened to delay an entire section of hull. Elias knew the error, Franklin knew it too, but pride wrapped Franklin like armor. To correct him bluntly would be to humiliate a craftsman who had given 30 years to the yard. Elias's challenge was no longer the plate, it was the man's dignity. Elias had watched Franklin over years, his quiet mornings arriving before the whistle, the way apprentices unconsciously mirrored his deliberate strokes, the soft pride glinting in his eyes whenever an inspector praised a weld line. Franklin was not careless. The misaligned plate was a rare lapse brought on by overwork and failing light. Yet rumors had already licked through the rivet gangs. Doss botched a seam. A blunt reprimand would feed the fire, confirm whispers, and carve shame into a man whose identity lived in flawless craft. Elias felt the tug of two currents, the managerial instinct to correct, and the human intuition that a soul once shamed seldom forgets. The question was how to restore accuracy without stripping Franklin's honor. Night felt like soot under the docks as Elias lingered by the warped plate, fingers tracing the faint skew invisible to casual eyes. He recalled his father, a blacksmith, murmuring, "A man stripped of respect will fight you with silence forever." Elias decided he would not win tomorrow by proving wrongness, but by inviting partnership. He jotted quick sketches on brown paper, showing the hole's curve as if an errant gust or faulty brace, not a human hand, had nudged the plate astray. He rehearsed words of curiosity rather than blame. "Franklin, I've been puzzling over the seam. Something subtle shifted. Help me see what you see." To outsiders it seemed trivial, but Elias knew the weight those words would carry. They would offer Franklin a bridge back to pride rather than a shove into disgrace. Morning brought salt wind and hammer clangor. Elias approached Franklin at the scaffolding, heart steady. "Frank, could I borrow your eye? This section's puzzling me." The older man straightened, wary yet intrigued. Together they crouched beside the seam. Elias traced the weld, speaking low. "Whole line wants a hair's breadth inward. Could the brace torque overnight?" By framing the flaw as circumstance, not incompetence, he left Franklin room to breathe. Franklin examined silently, then exhaled. "Could be, Foreman. When the tide shifted last dusk, she might have warped." His tone carried relief, the dignity snare loosened. Elias nodded gravely, as though the theory were entirely plausible. "Shall we ease her true before she hardens?" Franklin agreed, tools in hand, posture regaining its quiet majesty. As they worked side by side, Elias wove small affirmations into the rhythm of their toil. "Your weld bead yesterday was tight as clockwork. I trust your touch on the dolly here. You know her pulse." These were not flattery, but anchors, reminders that a single skew did not erase decades of excellence. Franklin's shoulders straightened as if shedding invisible stone. By mid-shift the seam lay trued, the whole curve sleek once more. Around them apprentices exchanged glances. Instead of a spectacle of reprimand, they witnessed collaboration laced with respect. Elias gathered the crew afterward, framing the correction as a victory over circumstance. "Good catch on the brace drift. Franklin spotted it before cure." He announced public credit for the very repair that had quietly saved Franklin's face. Men nodded, accepting the narrative as truth because no one's pride had been ground underfoot. Franklin's reputation remained intact, the whole advanced on schedule, the yard's heartbeat steadied. It cost Elias nothing but restraint and imagination, yet the return was loyalty minted afresh. Weeks rolled on and a subtle change rippled through the shipworks. Apprentices, sensing safety from ridicule, voiced uncertainties sooner. Journeymen, knowing mistakes would invite inquiry rather than scorn, double-checked without fear. Franklin, once reticent, mentored openly, unburdened by the need to guard an ego against public denting. Production not only recovered, but quickened. the intangible dividend of a floor stripped of humiliation. Elias realized that preserving one man's dignity had inoculated an entire crew against corrosive shame. Rumor of Elias's soft touch reached the yard superintendent, who summoned him with skepticism. "I hear you covered a botched prate," he accused. Elias replied evenly, "I preserved a master's will to build. The hull is sound, deadlines met, men united. Would you trade that for a moment's scolding?" The superintendent grumbled, but conceded results spoke louder than rhetoric. Elias sensed he had nudged the yard's culture an inch towards humanity, a change measured not in reports, but in the glint of pride behind oil-streaked faces.
Franklin sought Elias privately one dusk, eyes damp from salt spray or something deeper. "Foreman, I knew the fault was mine. You spared me a shame that outlived the plate. I'll not forget." Elias clasped the older man's forearm. "Frank, a hull can be trued with heat and hammer. A man's spirit, once warped, is harder to mend." No more was said, yet a silent pact sealed, a fidelity of craftsman to leader stronger than rivets biting steel. Through the harsh winter contracts, Elias employed the principle repeatedly. When a young riveter miscalculated pitch, he attributed it to tight steel and guided correction privately. When a draftsman's measurement slipped, he framed it as the drawing fighting the curve, inviting collaboration rather than finger-pointing. Each time the error yielded, morale soared, for men trusted the yard as a place where dignity outlived slip-ups. Word spread beyond Harrow Haven. Crews whispered of Kerr's gang, where discipline was real, yet laced with uncommon grace. By spring, absenteeism halved. Loyalty deepened so palpably that even labor agents conceded something rare stews on Pier 4. Elias suspected no sorcery, only the alchemy of saved faces. Where shame might have birthed defiance, respect birthed commitment. Journeymen stayed late unbidden. Apprentices lingered after whistle to refine skills. Franklin, rejuvenated, began drafting small improvements, eager to prove worthy of trust invested. A single avoided humiliation had cascaded into a cultural shift. Outside observers puzzled. Why no barking orders, no public dressing down? Elias replied, "A hull once warped can be reheated. A man once humiliated cools into resentment." His credo spread like tide among new supervisors, some skeptical until results gleamed unmistakable. Hull after hull slid from dry dock ahead of schedule, quality uncompromised, spirits high. Years later, Harrow Haven shipworks weathered depressions, strikes, and storms, yet Pier 4 retained an almost legendary cohesion. Men aged and retired with anecdotes of the day the foreman asked, not accused, retold over ale as proof decency could dwell even amid iron and deadlines. Franklin passed on, yet apprentices named after him carved their first welds under banners quoting Elias, "Correct the fault, guard the pride." Elias, silver-haired, looked back across decades of riveted steel and remembered faces, not hull numbers. The preserved dignity of one craftsman had multiplied into trust, productivity, even legacy. He understood that management divorced from humanity was brittle. Respect, once woven, endured like ship plating immune to rust. The world measured success in tonnage delivered. He measured it in souls unscarred. Thus, the shipyard tale endures. Faults can be fixed with fire and hammer, but a spirit crushed by humiliation corrodes silently. A leader who lets another save face forges an invisible keel of loyalty, carrying crews through storms of error and urgency. Elias Kerr's wisdom stands apart from the clangor of industry. Mercy is not softness, it is foresight. Where others see blame, he saw a bridge, and Harrow Haven sailed on it for generations.